Hi, this is Sarah, and I figured I would show you the first join for these two blocks in the Practical Joy quilt. Now then, I hope you've practiced using some little samples, joining two pieces together to make sure you have all of the measurements and what have you, settings on your machine in order for you to get the perfect join. Now we're ready to actually do it with a live block. So block 1A, block 2, these guys are joined together down this seam. I have a piece of sashing. It is very well best pressed and it is 2 1/8 of an inch wide. So right side, it has all of the texture in the coloring. On the wrong side, it's just a solid color, which works really well given that we're going to be able to see this wrong side on the back of the quilt. So everything right side up right now. I've got the top of the block facing away from me. I am going to take this piece of sashing and fold it right sides together with this block, and I want to make sure that the ends are exactly in place and we're good along this edge. I'm going to pin this. There's 1, 2, and in order to make sure that I don't get any slippage, I'm actually going to put a pin every 2 to 3 inches. Okay, now to go sew this with that scant 1/4 of an inch seam that you have just practiced. With this sashing stitched onto one piece, we're actually going to wrap the sashing around to the other side before joining this. As the blocks get bigger, I think that is going to be so much easier. So we are going to finger press the sashing away from the block. Give it a really good press. And if you want to do this with an iron, make sure that you're doing it without steam. Don't want to get any steam on your quilt. That will flatten it like a pancake. Okay, I'm going to turn this over and I'm going to wrap or fold the sashing over really tight. I'm going to pin it like that. And I'm just going to go all the way along here. And make sure that you don't inadvertently fold the backing over when you are doing your pinning and wrapping on this end. And we want to make sure that we are right on the money here, straight and straight. Now we are going to go stitch this, and we'll actually stitch it this way around. We want to stitch right in the ditch there between the sashing and the actual block. This edge has effectively been bound from the right hand side. We can pull the sashing out that way, and we're going to do the same on this edge here. So I am going to flip that over and we are going to pin this starting at this end, making sure that you have the blocks really perfectly aligned here on this edge and the sashing. So we're going to pop a pin in there. I'm going to turn this around so that we do the same on this side. So you want to make sure that you've got the blocks right on top of each other, aligned there. I'm going to put a pin in there, and then we are going to make sure that everything is pinned super well going along here. Okay, time for that scant 1/4 inch seam down here. Now that we've got that second seam stitched and the 2 blocks are joined together, we're going to wrap the binding or the sashing around this edge of this block. So finger press again, and you want to make sure that you really are pressing well and pulling the sashing away from the seam line. There we go. And now we are going to wrap that around, making sure that everything is aligned on the sides. I'm doing this the other way up, and so I'm going to pin in the ditch like that. Make sure that we've got this edge really lined up and straight as well. And put a few more pins in along here to make sure that we have a nice tight wrap around the end there. I'm of the opinion that there cannot be too many pins. So use more pins than you probably think is necessary for the best result. Okay, when we go to the machine, we're going to be stitching down in the ditch this way, and if you look underneath, we've got this is kind of over here, adding a little bit of bulk. So as you are stitching down there, depending on the foot that you're using, you want to be careful that the edge of the foot, ouch, jabbed on the pin, you want to be sure that the edge of the foot isn't being pushed by the edge underneath. So if you find that you are drifting because you're pushing here, maybe try your zipper foot, which allows you to stitch on the left hand side of the foot, and it ensures that you don't get any drift from pushing against that. So stitch in the ditch down that seam. We've stitched in the ditch down that side of this block, so the right hand side of the block sitting on the left hand side, if that makes sense. This is where magic is going to happen. We are going to flip everything right side up, and this should sit beautifully together. So on the right hand side, we're going to have this open join here. On the back side, we're going to have this solid piece of sashing here, and if we grab a ruler, your sashing on the back should measure pretty much exactly 1/2 inch wide. Also, when you flipped it up over to the front, your sashing should also measure 1/2 inch wide. So this is where you can have some fun making your quilt completely unique. We're going to stitch a decorative stitch down here to solidify this join. Now the requirement of the stitch is it needs to go from left to right over the join. So you could do a simple zigzag, and it doesn't have to be a wide one. It just has to put one stitch on the left hand side and one stitch on the right hand side of this center line. What I've chosen as my favorite stitch is the double-sided blanket stitch. So that on the Banana machines shows up under the quilting stitches, the quilting decorative stitches when you're sewing. A regular blanket stitch does a stitch forward and then it goes left, back to center, forward, left, back to center, forward. What the double blanket does is it takes a stitch forward, left, back to center, right, back to center, forward, left, back to center, right, back to center. And you could have the stitch as big or as little as you like. The default is 4 millimeters wide. Let me show you here. This is a 4 millimeter wide stitch, and I really like the way that looks. As I say, it doesn't have to be a big stitch. One thing to be aware of is stitches that kind of go forwards and backwards. Definitely don't choose one that tries moving side to side. But you know, some of the stitches actually will take a stitch forward and then I'll take a stitch backwards and maybe to the sides as well. So try and keep it simple. So a zigzag stitch would work really well. This double-sided blanket stitch works really well. Check your tension before you do it so that you can make sure that the back looks as nice as the front, because you will see it obviously on the back of your quilt. But it's going to look great. Now on the Bonina, I'm going to use the number 10 foot. That is the edge stitch foot, I think it's called, and it has the little piece that sticks out in the center, so I can run that straight down the seam, and it helps me to stay really straight. So let me pop off and get that stitched up, and then I'll be back for a final check-in. The decorative stitching has been done to join these two pieces together, and you can see that is a really solid join. There is no way that is going anywhere. So now that we've joined the two blocks together, we are going to make sure that we haven't added any error, and it's actually likely by joining the two blocks using this method that we may need to do a tiny bit of trimming. So these two blocks should measure 25 3/4 inches from this side to this side. How do I know that? I wrote the instructions and you're going to read the instructions. So 25 3/4 inches from here to here. Let me see, I'm going to bring on some rulers. So I have a 20-inch ruler here. I'm going to pop my calculator into the equation. So 25.75 minus the 20.5 inches that I have from this ruler gives me 5 1/4 inches. And so I'm going to measure 5 1/4 inches from the left-hand side of this block. So we've got 5 1/4 inches here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1/4. And I'm going to butt this ruler up against it, and I'm keeping the line here. And I do have a little bit of excess here, and I want to trim it off. The question is, do I want it all come off that side, or do I want some of it to come off that side as well? So I'm actually going to look at where the join line is between the two blocks, and I'm going to nudge the ruler, or rulers should say, ever so slightly that way, so that I'm right on the edge here. This block is 17 3/4 inches, so I'm gonna have that 17 3/4 inches right on the join line. So I'm gonna have a tiny hair to cut off that side and a tiny hair to cut off this side. So I am happy with that. I'm going to cut here. I always forget there's actually a hole in the table right there. And so I'm going to make that little cut again and slide my cutting mat back where it was. Okay, let's just get rid of that little bit. Now I'm going to flip around and we're going to go 5 1/4 inches over here. Get that ruler out of the way whilst we just get this one lined up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1/4. I'm going to align that. And we've got a teeny tiny little trim to do over here. Apart from I am not square there. I'm going to make sure that I am square all the way along. Okay, now we can so this might seem a little excessive, but if you have just a little tiny bit extra on one side or the other when you are joining the blocks together, it's gonna start not fitting, especially on the left hand side where you actually have 5 joins of blocks. So that little trim to tidy up when you've added your sashing is going to really help you when it comes to assembling the entire quilt. As you get bigger pieces, you're going to need to make sure that you have plenty of space and plenty of support around your sewing machine when you're sewing the larger pieces together. So make sure that you have all of the support that you need in tables when you're sitting at your machine. If you have a table that you can put down the left hand side to support the bulk of the quilt whilst you're sewing, that is going to help you tremendously. I am so excited to see all of these quilts coming together. We are going to go away and get this quilt all stitched up together, and I will be seeing you very soon. Thank you so much.